My name is Bill Brandt. I'm the Executive Chairman of Development Specialists, Inc., one of the world's better-known restructuring and turnaround firms. I grew up in Chicago, in the city and then the suburbs. It was an interesting life. I mean, growing up in any city is an education. So I was probably savvier than most of my friends because I grew up in the city environment. I was close to my parents, in those years, and I was the oldest of four boys. I was always the trailblazer. So the competition was rather fierce. If you used a fork at the table, you might get your hand stabbed, But it was good. My father worked in the mining industry, and my mother was just, as would be the case in the 1950s, a homemaker. I was going to be an urban planner, so I focused on that at St. Louis U. Found myself an excellent mentor and friend who helped me in urban planning and design, and ultimately the University of Chicago recognized what I was doing and gave me a scholarship to attend graduate school in Chicago again to pursue that. And I finished a master's a year after I graduated from college. Then I did 2 more years with the postgraduate work on the way to a PhD. And near the end of that, I fell into this business. The business was not a business. I was asked by an attorney in Chicago to help out with a case. I did that. I realized the minimal work I did in the case paid me more in that one fell swoop than I would likely make in 5 or 10 years teaching. So Mom didn't raise a fool. And, I began working in the industry, which was not an industry at that point. So I guess there are those that feel I helped found the industry of restructuring, corporate restructuring and turnaround work. This was 1974, 75. I had a couple of friends doing the work with me from time to time. I realized I wanted to make a go of it. So in 1977, we incorporated. I think we're one of the oldest firms, if not the oldest, doing it. And the rest is history. It's almost 50 years. What I was doing in college with urban design and urban planning and urban affairs was helping people. And it was the construct of policy to help people. And what I realized when I got into this business is I was helping people in a more immediate fashion. I was saving jobs, getting people their money back, kind of righting the ship for corporate enterprise. And so it was, there was an immediate gratification if you did something right. Where you could see the smile in people's eyes when they had their jobs saved, or they saw their future become more certain. And I found that very rewarding. I also found it extremely challenging. As I had worked towards my PhD, I had taken a fair number of courses in statistics and in mathematics, and I found that the use of those talents and that background in the corporate restructuring were of substantial importance. If you will, an ordered mind helped do the process. So I began to do that 1974, 75, and as I say, formed the firm in the corporate sense in 77, and here we are. I like to cite the parable of World War II, because when I began doing this business, it was only 25 years after the end of the war. A lot of the men and women came back from the war, took over their family businesses, which was the case in the 60s and 70s. And as business people will do, they took risks. I mean, banks charge interest because there was risk. I exist because there was risk. So they would, add a product line, or they would expand, or they would do something. And, no surprise, occasionally that wouldn't work out. And so that when it didn't work out, they found themselves often in a bit of trouble with their lender, often in a bit of trouble with their suppliers and trying to decide what to do. So we would come in and try and gather the creditors together and the bankers and work with them to see if there was a way to restructure the issue. I mean, in most cases, these men and women had realized that they'd gone one step too far. They knew what they'd done wrong. They just wanted a chance to gather their creditors in the room and say, okay, I took a risk. I thought it was going to pay off. It didn't. I'd like to, work out a deal with you folks and go on. It's a capable business. And if we can work something out, I'll be here for 50 more years buying your products or borrowing from your bank. And so that's sort of how it started out in the 70s and 80s initially, because private equity didn't exist and most businesses were family run or near family run. I went to several firms in the consulting industry. I worked for one. And I tried to convince them that this was an underdeveloped aspect of the industry. I was working for one company in Chicago that was doing restaurant development. And often several of those restaurant franchisees would find themselves in a problem. And the firm would then walk away from them. And I said, this is perhaps the most exciting part. So I worked for them in 73 and 74. And I realized that I wanted to do the restructuring. So I had a vision, and I was young and dumb, and I realized, I had no overhead. I said, if they're not going to do it, I'll do it. And so I started the firm with word of mouth, and because I already worked with a number of attorneys, I said, I'm available. And fortunately, they hired me. Just as fortunately, I was able to have a fair amount of success early on. The word spread. If you had a problem, call me. And as they did, I began to hire people from the businesses. It was kind of interesting. I would get in the business, and I would find young men and women who were very good at what they did. And when you have a restructuring, you have a very intense period of time. And things are coming at you willy-nilly, left and right. It's not your normal business. And I found several young people in each case who thrived on that. And I could also tell when the business got back to normal, they'd be bored. So at the end of the case, I said to them, if you like it, join me, because you're going to take your talents, as LeBron said, someplace else. And if you like this environment, you have to do it. So I would hire these kids, and I would put them in the next case and see how they did. And if they did well, I would put them in 2 cases at once, juggle even more balls to see how the pressure worked. And the good news is I hired over 50 people. The top 20 or so of them have been with me more than 25 years. This is, in some sense, an addictive business. If you're a deal junkie or you live for the excitement of this issue, it's very rewarding. So I've now been in the business long enough that several of the young kids I hired have retired. So not yet me, although I'm close. But it worked out real well. So in the end, I got very well known in Chicago for doing this. I was asked to expand into southern Florida by some of the lawyers. I did that in the early 80s, followed by Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Columbus, Delaware, even London. So, where, as Paladin said, have a gun, will travel. When they needed us, we went. The thing I'm most proud about has nothing to do with the company and everything to do with the background. When I was having a fair amount of success, the governor of Illinois asked me as a volunteer to head up the Illinois Bond Issuing Agency because it was in trouble. I served 3 terms of 9 years on the agency, and I not only fixed it, but I was sitting in a meeting at the same time. I was on the board of trustees for Loyola University of Chicago. I've always been a strong advocate for higher education. I went to a meeting, a quarterly meeting of the board of trustees of Loyola. They would have them at the various campuses each quarter. one quarter at the liberal arts school, one quarter at the med school, the business school. This one happened to be at the medical school. And the medical dean gave the introduction to the trustees, and he said his deepest regret was that he had a number of dream active DACA kids who wanted to come to graduate school, medical school, or dental school. But because they were not American citizens, they couldn't qualify for that scholarship process that the U.S. government has, the public health service has, where if you go to college, they'll give you a loan, and in exchange, you have to work in an underserved area for a while. So I heard this and I realized, well, we aren't bound by federal law. But we had a program at the bond agency called Future Family Farmers. And the idea was to help financially farms stay in their family by giving money to the younger farmers. And I thought if we could give money to farmers, and we should, we could give money to doctors. So I, using my restructuring background, I convinced the governor and Senator Durbin that Illinois ought to allow a scholarship program for DACA kids for all 9 of the medical or dental schools. They would get tuition and they would get interest forgiven after the school. They would go to the residency wherever they wanted, and then after residency they would come back to an underserved area of Illinois and practice for 3 years. What the hope is, they might say. Now, Illinois had an enormous amount of underserved areas. Not just, you think of Southern Illinois, but Polish neighborhoods in Chicago. And so, the typical person was thinking, okay, I'm going to be giving these out to mostly Mexican DACA kids. And the first class of 9 had Pakistanis, Brazilians, Nigerians, Polish people. I mean, it's Chicago, like New York. It was a mix. The program has now been going for 7 or 8 years. There are doctors who've completed their residency. They're back teaching in neighborhoods in Chicago, in Peoria, and it's become an instant hit. And, it is, if you will, a natural expansion of restructuring. What can you do to expand your mission with the tools you have and to do greater good for people? So that's what I'm most proud of. There are several, more than several, there are 8 to 9 large businesses I've saved, probably saved, they tell me, 50 to 100,000 jobs over the years, and that's great. I want people to, some of the business school people tell me you got to empower the employees and do all this. And I say no, most of the employees want to come to work every day knowing they have a job for fair pay. They want to go home, they want to put their kids through school, they want to put a roof over their heads, and they don't want to have to sweat about the future of their job. When I took the job at the Illinois Bonding Agency, President Clinton, who was a friend of mine because I was involved in politics, told me, if you want to enjoy life, when people ask you to do something, never be afraid to do something that you have no idea what you're doing, because you will learn. And if you think about the restructuring industry, there are a number of businesses I've approached where I didn't know anything about that industry. I learned well after the fact, but never be afraid of challenging yourself or taking or stepping onto something that you're not really sure about. It will work out if you have faith in yourself and the people around you. The other idea I learned when I ran the business is hire people smarter than you and get out of their way. I have 4 children. My oldest works on the Hill in Washington. The political apple didn't fall far from the tree, and does policy papers for Congress. My number 2, a boy, works in this firm and has for 10 years, got a double master's at Loyola, and is becoming quite the good restructuring guy. Number 3 is a young lady who works here in New York on Broadway as a producer. So my in for free tickets is my daughter, so always helpful. And my number 4 is in Denver pursuing an MBA, and I think we'll wind up staying out in the mountain area because that's what it is. So I've been married to the same woman for 42 years. She's a delight. She was a Senate press secretary for a Republican. I brought her to the dark side. But she tells me, as Charles Barkley says, the Republican, she didn't leave the Republican Party, it left her. So, but the family's been great. My wife is a saint, because if you think about it, I'm like a fireman. If there's a corporate distress, I've got to go when the alarm sounds. You're raising 4 kids, and I'm on the road all over the world. Literally, the last few years, I was in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Peru 3 or 4 times a month. My wife, bore the burden of raising the kids, did a phenomenal job, and I've learned, whenever I think I might have some criticism of how she did, the wisest course is to just shut up. So, because she did a better job than I ever could have. I think if you're going to have a career, 3 things are necessary. You got to like what you do, you got to have fun at it, and you got to want to do it. You got to keep wanting to do it. If any of those 3 legs of the stool are missing, don't bother. So if somebody wants to work on Wall Street or something, my advice to everybody is push and give it a try. Find a way in. Don't let anybody tell you you're not good enough or you lack the skill set. I'm not a financial consultant or an MBA. I came out of urban design and planning. But, with an ordered mind and with an idea of how to handle these matters, you can learn anything. And if you want to do it, the answer is you can. In California, the governor in 2002 asked me to co-chair a delegation to Cuba to see if I could sell agricultural products, and I met with Fidel, as you see in the pictures, for a while. A lot of odd things where, somebody says, would you like to go to Cuba and lead an agricultural delegation? The answer is just say yes. Why not? Life's too short, as I can tell you. As you can hear in my voice, sadly, I've been diagnosed with ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. It's affecting my voice. I probably have only a few more months of able to work, but focusing on that aspect of my mortality, I realize I never let a question go unanswered. If you ask me to do something, I give it a try. So I've led, as you see from the pictures, 3 or 4 lives by most people's measure. So I would not, I'm not anxious to depart the planet, mind you, but the fact of the matter is I've got no regrets. I lived it to the fullest. Was never afraid to try something, never cowed by people who told me I couldn't do it, and never impressed by people who told me that they were better than me. Prove it was the answer. I had a shoebox full of rejection letters, and much like Tom Brady and the others, I laugh when I see it. I was driven, or Michael Jordan, I was driven by the amount of turn down or turn away I got. It honed my competitive spirit and made me want to be better and show them all. I rest easy at night. I told my wife a long time ago, there are all kinds of people who are angry at me because I have to step on their toes to save jobs. And people threaten, you won't work in this town again. I said, I want you to, do a couple of things. We get some spam and some very soft pillows. Because if I listen to the threats, there'll be days we won't eat well, but we'll always sleep great, So as long as you can sleep great with no regrets, it's wonderful.